Great, thank you. All right, well, welcome everyone to the MSR Flamekeeper webinar on November 11th, 2020. And I want to introduce Paul Schmidt, who is helping me with the technology and energetically as well. Tell you the agenda today. And if you've just joined us, please, hi, Ken from Japan. Nice to have you with us. It's the middle of the night for you, I know. I'm asking people to put your name and location in the chat so we can all know where you're from. Chris, glad to see you, Chris. Thank you for coming. Um, so um, let's see, maybe what I'll do is go ahead and have you, let's see. I'm going to see if I can share my screen. Okay, now you need to do that for me, Paul, to put up the PowerPoint.
You should be able to share, but
It doesn't say I can. It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
well, that's silly. That's not something I can change during.
Yes, Paul, you can make Judi the host.
Well, I need to be the host for other reasons, so.
But you can share my PowerPoint.
You should be able to share, but here, try that setting now.
You click on multiple participants can share. That'll do it.
I've got all that going on.
Okay, I got it. Okay.
There you go.
All right, let's see if this will work. And we want to have it from the slideshow. All right. No, I don't see anything yet. There we go.
I can see it.
That works for everybody?
Yep.
All right, terrific. So welcome to the MSR Flamekeepers meeting webinar on other ways of knowing. And I wanted to give you just a little bit of background on Flamekeepers and our purpose. This is a group in the management spirituality.
Another White House official test positive.
Oh, somebody's not. Maybe we should ask everybody to be muted during this particular time. Thank you. And so the purpose of the Flamekeepers Committee at the Management, Spirituality, and Religion Interest Group at the Academy of Management is to keep the founding flame of the MSR group alive. This is a group that was formed 4 years ago of the 3 founders, Jerry Bieberman, Lee Robbins, and myself. And then we've been inviting other elders and wise ones to join us from as our group grows. And we serve as a sounding board for the MSR Executive Committee. And one of the things we do is hold big questions webinars every quarter. And we ask big questions that are beyond what's normally talked about within MSR, that are particularly with the focus around planning for the conference and supporting doctoral students and helping people get published and all those kinds of things. So we want to take a look at the deeper questions that led to the birth of this interest group within the Academy and in the field of workplace spirituality in general. What are the big questions that are driving our unfolding? So I mentioned 3 of the Flamekeepers, and then in addition, Richard Paragoy, Yochanan Altman, Chris Laszlo, and Catherine Pavlovich. So we are the keepers of the flame of MSR. I want to start with just a brief period of reflection. And this quote comes from Chris Laszlo's book, Quantum Leadership, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. But this was a quote that he had of Einstein, and I'm going to read it and then ask that we just take a minute or so of silence and reflection as we get into our conversation. Einstein wrote, "The intellect has little to do on the road to discovery. There comes a leap in consciousness. Call it intuition or what you will. The solution comes to you and you don't know how or why." So please join me in a moment of silence and reflection. Thank you very much, and welcome to anyone else who joined us. If you're just coming on, please add your name and location in the chat so we can all be saying hello to each other. So what I want to do is spend about 15 or 20 minutes sharing some thoughts with you as conversation starters. And then I have two different discussion questions that Paul will help us break out into small groups to discuss. And then we'll come back and reflect on what happened in the small groups for question one. Then we'll go to question two and come back and reflect, and then end with some announcements about other things that are happening. So the big question for today is, what other ways of knowing are relevant for MSR research, teaching, and practice? And I would add, and are relevant for life. I've invited my Edgewalker community to be a part of this call today, and some of them are not scholars, although all of them are change agents. So I'm going to make this conversation relevant to everyone who's joined us. Within the Academy of Management, we talk about research as a way of knowing, and really the kind of the boundaries of that are within these two streams, either quantitative research or qualitative research, or my favorite word that I learned in a doctoral program was triangulation, which means using both of those. And that's been the traditional way of looking at research. And I've just always, since the beginning of our field, thought that there's got to be room for something more. That I know in my own work, I felt like there were other ways I knew things that didn't fit into quantitative and qualitative, but I didn't know how to name them or describe them, but I knew that they were very useful. So I'm going to share some stories with you, and then we'll get into the discussion questions. First is a definition of noetic, and many of you are familiar with the Institute of Noetic Sciences, but this definition comes from William James, and this is what I'm trying to point to. He says that noetic, or that these ways of knowing, these other ways of knowing, are states of insight into depths of truth unplumbed by the discursive intellect. They're full of illuminations, revelations, full of significance and importance, all inarticulate, though they remain. And as a rule, they carry with them a curious sense of authority. And people say, I don't know how I know this, I just know. That's what we're looking at. So I want to start by reading something from a book I just discovered. The book is called Connected: The Emergence of Global Consciousness by Roger Nelson, which was published last year. And he opens his book by saying, in a key scene in the first Star Wars movie, Obi-Wan Kenobi is traveling in a spaceship when he suddenly staggers as if in pain. Luke Skywalker sees this and asks, "Are you all right? What's wrong?" With some effort, Obi-Wan gravely replies, "I felt a great disturbance in the Force, as if millions of voices suddenly cried out in terror and were suddenly silenced. I fear something terrible has happened." Obi-Wan was referring to the evil empire's use of a terrifying weapon called the Death Star, which had just been used to destroy the planet Alderaan. Besides acting as a compelling plot point, what's most interesting about this scene is that it didn't need extensive explanation. Somehow we all knew what Obi-Wan meant and what he felt. This strange knowing raises a series of intriguing questions. Is it a disturbance in the Force? Is this just an engaging fictional fantasy, or is it real? And is there a way to objectively detect it so we don't have to rely on Obi-Wan to inform us that something terrible just happened elsewhere in the galaxy? These are fundamental questions about the woof and warp of the universe and about the role that consciousness plays in the complex tapestry we call reality. This is one of my favorite lines. The questions at the edge of what we know about the mind seem to me to be really worthwhile. They are difficult and thus interesting, but beyond that, there is a reason to believe that they are essential questions with implications for our very survival on Earth. We hardly know what questions to ask to learn more. I'll post that quote in Edgewalkers and on the MSR page. So I want to tell you a story from Elizabeth Meyer's book, Extraordinary Knowing. And this is how she starts chapter 1. And it was stunning to me to read it because she talked about a harp that was stolen. Her daughter's very precious and valuable harp was stolen after a performance. And she spent 2 months searching through with the police and through musical societies and as many different ways as she could think of to try to find her daughter's harp, who her daughter really missed it, was not able to be happy playing anything else, even though they rented her different harps. And so she was explaining her frustration to a friend, and the friend said, "Are you willing to try anything in order to find that harp?" And she said, "Yes, I would. I would try anything. I want my daughter to be happy." So her friend recommended that she find a dowser. And she looked online and found that there was a man named Harold McCoy who was the head of the Dowsing Society, the American Dowsing Society. And if you don't know what dowsing is, it's using some kind of instrument to intuit energy, basically, or to intuit information. And Harold McCoy is from Fayetteville, Arkansas, where I live. I didn't put that in the chat, but I'm in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and quite a renowned figure here in Fayetteville. A number of my friends have studied with them in terms of healing and intuition and dowsing. And I could say this, he's a real McCoy. And in this story, she called Harold McCoy up. This is Elizabeth Meyer, called it Harold McCoy up. And he said, "Give me a minute," and did whatever he did to use his intuition and said, "Yes, your harp is still in Oakland." And he asked her to send him a street map. And this was back before you could send things over the internet. So she overnighted him a street map of Oakland. And he called her up the next day and he gave her the exact address of where the harp was. And she was able to get the harp back, and there's a little bit complexity to that story, but she got the harp back. And when she got home after picking up the harp, she said to herself, "This changes everything." And the reason it was important to her is she's a scientist and very much based in the quantitative and qualitative methodology, and very active academic at the time. And she could not, through any means, explain how he knew what he knew, this other way of knowing. And she began doing research with other scientists to ask them if they had had other anomalous experiences like this. And she found that it was very common among scientists and others, these anomalous or other ways of knowing experiences, and how important these kinds of ways of knowing are to life and to science, and specifically. So I want to move on to talking about Chris Laszlo's book with Fred Sau, Um, and this book is called Quantum Leadership, New Consciousness in Business. And they define consciousness. Well, I'll get to that in a minute. The point of the book is to help us move from a consciousness of separateness to a consciousness of connectedness. And I think that has major implications for research, for teaching, for practice, for life. And let me read the definition that they have. Consciousness is the awareness of the mind of itself and the world around it is a powerful root cause of who we are, how we behave toward others and nature, and why we act the way we do. Transforming our consciousness is the most effective tool we have for unlocking local and global change. So that leads me to asking, what if consciousness were our most important research tool? And what would research methods look like if they came from a higher level of consciousness than the consciousness of separateness?
I'm
Uh,
reaching out to
gonna
Ingrid.
ask- Gladys, can you please mute?
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
No problem. So, yeah, if we came to our research not from the point of view of I'm the researcher and you're the researchee, or I'm the expert and I'm going to see you as a tool of my models that I'm building, but what if we came from this higher level of consciousness of oneness? What would our research look like? So I've been curious about how different people do research, and I want to talk about this book for a minute. Patricia Aberdeen's a friend of mine, and she wrote many books, but one of the best-selling ones was Megatrends 2010, The Rise of Conscious Capitalism. And I was interviewing her when I ran the Center for Spirit at Work. We did monthly calls with experts, and she was sharing all this different data about various kinds of trends. And she said workplace spirituality was the major trend of the 7 trends that she saw between the year 2000 and 2010. And I said, well, how do you actually, do your research? I thought, she would be spending lots and lots of time reading newspapers and reading books and interviewing people. And she did do all those kinds of things. But she said, Judi, let me tell you that the main thing I do is I journal every morning, and it's my spiritual practice. And in my journaling, I ask my guides for help. And as I'm working on the book, I ask the guides to direct me into what I should be asking and who I should be contacting. And I get this information that tells me what the major trends are and what I should be looking at. And of course, she did the reading and interviewing. She also told me that something that had really, really helped her was she called a channeler, a woman in Hawaii who was well known for being a powerful channel. And that woman gave her really specific advice about her research and what was going to be unfolding in her life and work. Well, at that time, I was in the middle of writing a book myself, the book Edgewalkers, and I was kind of stuck. And I asked Patricia for the name of the channeler because I was kind of like Elizabeth Meyer, had tried everything else to get unstuck and didn't know what else to do. So I was willing to try a channeler. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more of that story, but I want to plant this question for the discussion groups. And that question is, have you had any anomalous experiences in your research, your teaching, your life, or your work? Some kind of other way of knowing. And in your groups, you'll be sharing that briefly. We'll have groups of 3 people, and you'll have 15 minutes. So that's about 5 minutes each. I'm going to ask you to really manage that time. And so before you break out in the groups in just another minute, I'm going to share my example of what happened when I talked with the channeler. And we're going to hold off on any open discussion with the whole group right now. But after you break out in your small groups, we'll come back into the large group. And there's many of you who have expertise in this area, and I'm hoping you'll share that. So with my example with Edgewalkers, I called up this channeler. I was halfway through the book. I had written half of it, had 50% of it to go, and 2 months to write the rest of the book. I'd been working on it for 18 months, and I just didn't think I could make the deadline. I called my publisher, and he said, I've already given you 2 extensions. I can't give you any more. If you can't meet this deadline, your book's not going to get published. And right at that time, I also got a contract with Pfizer. They were doing a merger with Warner Lambert that gave me 40 hours a week of consulting while I was teaching full time. So, of course, the only smart thing to do in something like that is call a channeler and then go to Denmark for a week's meditation. And that's what I did. And the channeler, I told her the question, and she said, "Oh, the spirit world is taking care of it. Don't worry." And I said, "Well, there must be certain things that I can do, or, that's not enough information. Can you tell me more?" And she said, "No, there's nothing else I can tell you. What other questions do you have?" And she really would not say anything more, because she said, "You need to trust. It's all being taken care of." The one thing that she did say was, in order for this book to be completed, you need to practice what you preach, and you need to walk between worlds. You need to go into the spirit world, and you'll be given what you need. And from that moment on, everything unfolded miraculously. One specific instance was, I knew that there had been something written about 0 point in quantum physics and the 0 point field. And I wanted to write about that. And I thought I had a book on it. And I'm looking through all my shelves, and I cannot find that book. And I'm frustrated, and I just give up and accidentally knock something over the back of my desk. And so I lean over on the back of my desk, and I go down and pick that thing up, and I see a magazine has fallen down behind there that I didn't know. It's probably been there for a year. And I pick it up, and the front of the magazine says 0 point field. Oh my God. It's like the universe just gave me a gift. I finished that book in 2 months easily. I had many visions and downloads of models, and it just flowed. I did not have time to proofread. So I turned the book in on April 30th, which was my deadline, at probably 11:55 p.m., and sent it to my publisher. He sent me a message about 7:30 the next morning saying he stayed up all night reading the manuscript. He wouldn't change a word. And I was stunned, because I was just trying to get, it's like, okay, you have a publisher because they're going to help you with editing and so on. But it was complete, and it felt like it was channeled. The second half of the book felt like it was channeled. So that's my example, and I want to now ask Paul, let's stop. I'll stop the sharing for now, and we'll break into small groups of 3. Oh, let's see. I guess we should put that question. Oh, I can't find it. I'm sorry. Well, the question is, what anomalous experiences of other ways of knowing have you had? And so we want you to share that. And I'll type that in the chat. If I can remember how to spell anomalous. Okay. I think we're ready.
Sounds good. And I think you said 15 minutes, groups of 3. There's one group of 2. So we'll see you back here in 15 minutes.
All right. Thank you.
I have so many examples, Judi. Uh, it's like how I live my life anymore.
Yeah,
Did
me
you
too.
want to be in a Did you want to be in a breakout or?
No, this is fine. You and I could be a great breakout.
Awesome.
Yeah. So share some.
Oh my gosh. Um, well, they were going through my mind, and then I got all into the breakouts and got distracted. I did mix up men and women as much as possible, and I got
Oh,
things
bless your heart.
going. Yeah. Gosh, let me see. Well, really, I mean, just I'll go to yesterday. I was just scanning back, or Monday, excuse me. Um, I was on a run. I went on a run in the morning in 4 inches of fresh snow in a field, and I was taking stock. Just so beautiful out there.
Mm.
And running is a spiritual practice for me when I make it so, which is usually. And so I was just checking in with the energy, and everything was light. I was bouncing along, and everything except me was light. and 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 so I was taking stock because I'm kind of at a self-defined threshold with a number of really new and exciting, juicy projects like the Global Consciousness Institute and others right on my doorstep. And I've done some clearing and said no to a few things lately to keep things as breezy as possible in my schedule. But in particular with Verdant World, which has been a project of 4 years now. And it's just been this beautiful calling. And yet the clarity in that space has not resulted in a lot of progress, and just the word I had woken that morning with the word movement and this feeling and progress, and so I was just taking stock and really feeling ready, really feeling at the completion of a class that I took, a 6-week class in regenerative business design to try and break the ice in terms of moving things forward on a structural level, in particular with Verdant World. But in any case, I came back to my office after this run with just this feeling of readiness. And like I said, I put the call out, whether it's as mundane as I want the Rockstar parking spot right in front of the movie theater with time on the meter to boot, and getting that kind of thing, you
Yeah.
know, and so anyway, I get back to my desk and open up my email, and there's a message that from somebody I don't know that begins with, I represent the so-and-so foundation that I don't know. And we want to gift you, this amount, a modest yet really sizable amount, four zeros on it. And Verdant World flies under the radar. We don't have a big presence out there. People don't find us. It's not somebody I recognize. And yet we've put out this amazing energy. And
Wow.
and it says, so we want to gift you this, and I can't use a credit card on your website. So all I need is your bank account information.
Oh.
Right? Right?
Okay.
I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. I don't really need to fund a Nigerian prince right now. And as much as I am working in Africa, but besides that, so I dig in a little bit to the foundation name, and it's not there. It doesn't show up on GuideStar, and I'm like, okay. And so I dig in further, and I find the 990 for the association that I got off the email address. And there's Frank Fode's name from the guild.
Oh, oh my goodness.
So turns out it's a family foundation, just a little, again, under the radar thing without any presence. And he, out of a conversation, well, our relationship through the guild only, and our conversation, his experiences at the retreats, which, I got one of those calls after the first one from you, uh, and and a call that we had the week before with Alan about the environmental special interest group, ecological special interest group. And I didn't even remember talking about Verdant World, but he made a generous gift, and it was just so in line. It just like felt right there. So not direct maybe, but a little bit, definitely one of those stories. And I called him to thank him, obviously, and he was like, well, I don't know anything about your organization or what you do, so fill me in. I'm like, well, where did this come from? He said, just because of who you are and who you be. I just, I got to get rid of some money before the end of the year, and go for it. Tell me what you're going to do with it. And I was like, oh my God. It's so incredible, because I had this, I do this dance in my life, living from purpose, and watch my bank account, and it's common for me to float 30 to 90 days from broke, and I don't have a extremely light footprint financially, and but I've grown mostly comfortable with that. I mean, I have ultimate trust, and there's nothing I will change. It just brings focus to me, and I won't ever sell out for money. But I get a little nervous. I start losing fingernails, when it gets tight. And anyway, so that's a long version of my most recent story. Oops.
Oh, yeah.
I did 26. Sorry, I always forget to set the timer. Go ahead.
Okay, it's been going about 5 minutes.
Yeah, five, six.
Yeah, we started at 2:28 on my clock, and it's
28. Okay. So, all right. In 2 minutes, I'll sound the halfway bell.
thank you.
No
I
worries.
don't know how to do that. I am so grateful for your help.
It's part of what you get if you're going to be involved with me, Judi. It's my pleasure completely.
Mm. And
Anytime, really.
What?
Anytime, really.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah,
Yeah.
I need a lesson. You
Sure.
teach me. Yeah. But what a story. And I have had such a good feeling about Frank when he talks at the guild, and that now I have an even better feeling about him. For him to see you and support you that way, that's magnificent. That's just fabulous.
It goes on. We ended up talking for almost 2 hours this morning, and
Really?
he started talking about his property. It's 340 acres southwest of Portland, Oregon, and it's got some unique and really special qualities to it. And
The fires didn't affect him?
no, and he's doing some ecological restoration, has invested heavily, and his vision for the property is a retreat center, with a learning center for global consciousness and a wellness center, and on all of this. And I'm like, okay, Frank, well, here's a couple other things you don't know about Paul. First of all, I spent 30 years running spas and wellness centers and hospitality, and consulting on development and design for these things. And he's like, oh my God, I need you so bad.
Oh,
So
wow.
I said, and with respect to the global consciousness thing, there's this other little project I'm doing, and there might be a relationship there. And so anyway, it's just, the connection, the depth of that connection belies the subject of this webinar.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like you're true to your calling and the universe supports you.
just provides. It really just provides. All right, halfway through, we're about 30 seconds late, but that's okay. All right. That's a great experience of, you've read the Aquarian Conspiracy, right? Yeah.
Oh, that one has been so influential in my thinking about how change happens. It's just, it's one of those structural things that all these small groups start to link up, and at some point there's a critical mass, and then everything shifts. And that I'm counting on that because we're in it.
I last read that in the, gosh, mid 80s, right? When it came out, early 80s.
Mhm.
And yeah, it was great because at that point I was starting a healing center in Burlington, Vermont, and in the core group was a psychic and astrologer, very accomplished. And so we were building this organization out of the guidance from the universe in that way. And I think maybe it was her that had recommended the book. She and I was just enthralled, you know, as a basically entirely channeled book. You know, it was really neat. I need to revisit it. None of my favorite books still exist on my shelf because I give them away. Greg,
Hi,
you're
Greg.
back. Was your breakout that boring? You just had to leave and join us?
My my internet crapped out.
Okay, which do you remember who you were with? Oh, I think I know. Anita and David?
Yeah.
Okay, let me send you back over there. You are going to.
That's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, not a problem. You might need to go to, there you go, bye. All right.
Check in, check out.
Oh gosh, let me close the shoot. I didn't pause the record.
That it doesn't. Oh, it's recording our talk.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah,
Okay.
that's fine. I'm
Good.
happy to.
Well, it was part of the sharing.
It's all good. It's all good. I'm
Yeah.
glad I didn't share too much about that donation, so that's good.
No, you were very tasteful about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah,
We're not a breakout room, is what this is, right?
we're in the main space.
Yeah. Okay. So it did record. Oh well.
It's okay. I'm happy to pause it now if you want, or
No, that's fine.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm actually wishing this whole thing were longer because we've got people. Do you know Greg? Oh, yeah, he's a part of Conscious Leadership Guild.
Greg Stebbins, yeah.
Yeah. And he runs a university.
I don't know him very well, but oh, and there's Alina.
Is she in another group before?
That's one thing I can't intuit very well. I should have taken a screenshot.
Oh. Hi, Alina.
Hi, how are you?
Alina, have you been kicked out of your breakout room or are you just joining us?
I'm just joining. I just realized I missed the 3 o'clock starting point. Sorry. So is everybody in breakout rooms?
That's fine. We're actually due to come back now, Judi, so or in about a minute. So
All
So
right.
if it's okay, I'll just listen and I'll turn my mic back off.
Great. Glad to have you here. And
Thank
you can
you.
put in the chat, put your where you're from in the chat, Alina. So say hello to everybody.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Mhm.
yeah, I just gave him 2 minutes. So Judi, I'll
Okay.
close it up in one, and they'll have 1 minute to come back.
So when you do the, halfway through in 2 minutes, you're just sending a chat to everybody, or is that an automated?
No, in the breakout window, breakout management window, there's a little button that says broadcast message to all.
Oh, okay.
You can send little notes that show up on their screens.
So there's not like an automatic timer where you can set it to be 15 minutes and They should do that. Next time they ask me, I'll tell them.
Well, you know, I think sometimes you want to change on the fly.
Yeah.
And what you can change is the amount of time that they're given before it automatically brings them back to the room. It's defaulted at 1 minute, which is fine.
Yeah.
But you can make it longer or shorter if you want
Yeah.
in the settings. So I'm going to go ahead and close the rooms.
Okay.
And that will give everybody 60 seconds to rejoin us.
Great. And I want to set my timer for 15 minutes so I remember.
I might have shorted them by a minute, but we've got a tight agenda, so that'll be fine.
Yeah. But we're right on schedule. Now this is where we lose being on schedule when people
Okay.
But
Well,
maybe
let's do exactly what we were just talking about and Intuit.
Yeah.
Perfect timing.
Bill Judge, hello.
Hi there, Judy.
Hi, good to see you, my friend.
Nice to see you. New do there, huh?
Yeah, this is a COVID-19 latest style. It grows
I
out,
see.
you don't go and get it cut, and that's what happens.
I like it. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Whoops.
2 more minutes.
No, that's it. We're back in the.
2 more months.
Everybody back? All right.
2 more months.
All right.
Hey, well, welcome back, everybody. I hope you had some good discussions and I hear, wonderful. So I'd love, oh, Matt, hi, good to see you. So rather than have each group report out, I just want to open it up for the next 15 minutes for you to share either something that you shared in your group or that you heard in your group that was inspirational to you, or it's just open forum here on anomalous experiences that relate to research, teaching, practice, life. What's this all about, these other ways of knowing? But know that we've got 36 people here, so when you share, try to keep it to the essence of what it is you'd like to share. Who'd like to go first? Just jump in.
Let me do mine in one bullet, Judy.
Okay.
My first reaction to the question was, this is Charlie Colpitz, my reaction was, in order to have an anomaly, you have to have an expectation. And one way to keep, let me leave it at that. So you don't have anomalous behavior if you don't have a constraining expectation.
Wow, and that says a lot about consciousness too, because if your consciousness is limited, then more things become anomalous. Wow, you blow my mind, my friend. Thank you. Thank you.
I'll go next if I may.
Yes, please.
I was in the middle of a PhD study and I had somebody who I met through another research study who was doing research who said something that has stuck with me and was incredibly profound. I'm fairly severely dyslexic, and so being asked to write 80,000 words is somewhat tricky. And she said, of course, she said, people with dyslexia are like magpies. And I said, pardon? She said, yes, they collect everything in the world that is shiny and don't have a clue what to do with it. And I was sitting there with 70,000 words of comment, and I didn't know what on earth I was doing it. And she said, of course you're making a model. Am I? And as you said, Judy, suddenly all the pieces of the jigsaw fell into place. It was still a huge amount of work, but I knew where it was going. And interestingly, I didn't produce a model because under British PhD speak, if you start talking about a model, you have to do all the theoretical work behind model development, and that's another 20 pages. So I produced a framework, because if you produce a framework, you don't have to talk about model development. So hint for everybody there, if you want to save yourself time, develop frameworks, not models.
I love it. I love it, Richard. Thank you. It's like when we download something, how do you explain the linear analytical background when it's a gift from the universe? And the same thing happens in CEOs. Jerry Harvey, who was a professor at George Washington University, right, Julia? He would go and work with CEOs to help them with their leadership and change management. And he would talk openly about some of these anomalous consciousness, spirituality, ways of thinking and being, and in board meetings. And at the end of the board meeting, quite frequently, he would have a CEO would come to say, rather than having the car take you back to the airport, I'd like to take you back to the airport if you don't mind. And the reason is that the CEO wanted someone to talk to about these other ways of knowing. They would have gut level ways of knowing. That was usually the way they described it. Or sometimes it was prayer, an answer to prayer. But they couldn't talk about it publicly. And it's the same way in academia. It's like, somehow you're supposed to justify it analytically, and in corporations, you have to justify it financially. So you make stuff up to support what you know deep in your gut is true. Thank you. Julia, it looks like you have something you'd like to share with what came in your group.
Well, we thank you, Judi. We kind of saw a connection that sometimes that when we have these anomalous experiences, that it can bring up a measure of rupture or dislocation, and that it required us to, it requires us to stay in a space of liminality that is a little disorienting, and it can be, a hard thing to do. That's what we kind of came up with. And with practice, we can stay there longer, but it is, Joanna Macy says that this is why people aren't really attending to the climate crisis, because we don't have the resilience to stay in that space of acknowledging the suffering and the pain of the planet. So we just turn away and we deflect, or, yeah. Thank you.
So there's all the more need for grounding, literally, like earthing and grounding. Gives us that resilience. Julia, since you are here, you are my hero and expert on research and other ways of knowing. Can you give us like a minute or two of things you'd like to share with others? And at some point, we need to have you do like a whole session on other ways of knowing.
Thank you. So, when you first started talking, Judi, about research teaching life and work, I mean, let's put it all together and say that it's like action research, right? That research can change the world. There are many multiple methodologies out there that are actually, methods for us to design change. There's new ways of thinking about, future forming research. In the past, research has been based upon past evidence, and we build from past evidence, and we analyze data, and then we do some implementation based upon the evidence. But when the evidence that we have at our hand is what is causing a lot of the problems in our market economy, our environment, our civil society, the evidence we have at hand isn't going to be helpful. It's like Einstein said, we need to think of a different way to create new futures. And to me personally, I'm on this journey of understanding how future forming action research can be anchored in what I call the sacred or divine knowing, or consciousness of connectedness, as Chris would say, that when researchers, and Indigenous scholarship is aligned with this as well, when researchers are able to be the clear read and anchored in the divine knowing, that the research will flow through and generate new findings that can be positive and future forming. And it really reorients the whole process because there's no subject-object division. I'm following a indigenous practice where my research subjects, that's the objective term, are really I consider having sacred relationships with the people that are co-creating the new knowledge with me in the research process. And the methods I choose can be guided by intuitive ways of knowing. So I really do see an opportunity to blend. I think of it perhaps as the source, right? Whatever source you believe, it can come through you to inform the research design, the research questions, the research practices, how you disseminate the research, who you disseminate it to. So I see a full paradigm shift happening, and yeah, we're going to do it.
Yeah, and you are really just an incredible leader for us in that. And so thank you so much. We're just so thrilled that you're a part of our community and our lives. So, and I'd like to build on that with Chris Laszlo, because Chris is going to be doing a Flamekeeper webinar in April on prospective ways of knowing, prospective psychology. And so, Chris, can I have you say just a minute or two about that? Because it really builds on what Julia just said. And then again, I'm going to open it up to other people to report on what they said in groups. And is Chris, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Hi, Judi. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. And yes, actually, it's just an extension or building on what Julia said. This perspective research, the idea that instead of scholarship being studying past and the present to better understand the present and the future, that and to study the past and the present the way it's done in traditional scholarship, which is to turn to data and theory that meet the standards of scientific theorizing. Perspective research is more concerned with thinking about the kind of future that we want to bring into existence, and asking the research questions that are aimed at shaping a particular future. I think that's my understanding of what Julia meant by, certain kind of action research. It's action research that engages the world around you in choosing words and choosing questions that by asking them and by engaging people in those questions actually shapes the present and moves us towards a particular desired future. So Marty Seligman has sort of done quite a bit in this area. He's got actually, I think he has a grant from, it might be the Fetzer Institute, a grant to develop more this whole idea of perspective psychology, calls it. But I think if I could just add to it, I think there's this idea that when we slow down the ways of knowing and sensing that we are usually engaged in, we open our whole brain and body and heart and mind and soul, we open that up to other ways of knowing. And I think there's very interesting work done in medicine and in neuroscience and in the quantum sciences that suggests that we may be able to process information at a quantum level if we shut down all the other systems, because we're so overloaded usually by sensory input and by this dominant left brain analytic thinking, that we don't really allow ourselves these other ways of thinking, whether it's, somatic intelligence, the vagus nerve, where we often ignore it to our health, perils to the risk to our health, or to perhaps the wisdom, the spiritual traditions talk about the wisdom from the universe. And so if what a lot of spiritual traditions have suggested about tapping into some sort of universal source, the Brahman, the Tao, Ein Sof, the Asha, all these traditions have different words for it. These are now being confirmed in some ways by cutting edge research in quantum science and in consciousness research. This may not be just metaphorical that this is happening. There's actually an increasingly evidence of physical correlates to support these other ways of knowing. And then lastly, and I'll stop, I'm sorry, I don't want to take up more time, but lastly, I was reminded about your experience, Judi, of, needing to have access to the psi field and finding that book. There are lots of examples in history of people who have had those kind of experiences. And among them are David Bohm, Thomas Edison, George Washington Carver, a lot of really prolific thought leaders, intellectuals, Einstein also, who describe knowing as a sort of downloading. Mm-hmm. Like, they would actually experience, or Beethoven or musicians, Mozart, they would actually see an entire symphony in one go. So all of this speaks to the lived reality of other ways of knowing. And I'm just so excited to be here and to be part of this so important topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much. You're reminding me, because I'm a songwriter and I'm no Beethoven, but I never listened to Buddy Holly when I was growing up. I was folk music, and didn't pay any attention to anything else. But I channeled Buddy Holly. I heard him in a dream say, I want you to write these words down. And the song goes, I'm so wild about you, baby, since the day that we first met. And it goes on. And it's like a Buddy Holly song, nothing like anything else I ever wrote. So we have access in very interesting and amazing ways. And the more we can use that, the better the world is. So I'd like to take one more comment, and then I'm going to invite you to go back into groups again. So who else would like to add something to the discussion right now? Just jump in.
Sanil, may I?
Yes, please.
Okay, so thank you. This is great to be with this group. Wonderful, big question to begin with. And I just, I liked what Charlie began with, that to have something anomalous, you have to have an expectation. Because in our subgroup, I said, what I'm going to describe is not anomalous. It's something new does open up. So it's revealing, and I would call it direct knowing. I think something similar to what Chris was mentioning, unmediated by concepts, language, etc. Yeah. So it's, and they open up at when you're least expecting. You're listening to somebody describe a U theory and into theory U, and then you look at it and say, oh, I think there's a faster way, it's a V theory, and that's it sort of comes to you, and it just grows in your consciousness certain ways. And so, I gave a couple of examples like that. So those are in ways in which things come to you when you least expect it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think you do so much work around transcendental consciousness, the transcendent, that there's practices that allow it to happen more frequently and maybe even on request. And so go ahead.
Yeah, I think that definitely is scalable through a constant practice. So you have greater access to that deeper connectedness or consciousness within you. And it actually happened to me after coming to this university 8 years ago. Over a period of time, series of such non-anomalous, direct, intuitive experiences came, and they all led to something new, beautiful. Almost every couple of years, something or the other happens. Nice happens.
And that's why you're enjoy so much.
I enjoy so much, absolutely, and I'm sure everybody would too.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Neal. All right, I want to move into the second question, and I'm going to see if I can get back to sharing my screen. I'm having interesting, oh, there we go. I think this is going to do it. Hold on a second. There we go. So this is the second question here. What implications does these, oops, hold on a second. Does these other ways of knowing, this direct, intuitive ways of knowing, these non-anomalous, thank you, Neal, experiences, Neal and Charlie, what implications do these ways of knowing have for our research and practice? And so what we'll do now is put you in groups of 4 people, and going to do this for 10 minutes to allow for more group discussion afterwards. I'm going to stop share. Oh, let's see if I can I cut and paste that? Nope, I can't. Okay, but the basic question is, what implications does this have for our research? I'll put that in the chat. I'll just put life and work. Okay, and so Paul, if you're ready, please take us away to our rooms.
Off we go.
Thank you. All right. Not enough time.
And I'm happy to train you in hosting, but honestly, the first mistake is trying to facilitate and host at the same, and tech host at the same time. It's not recommended.
Yeah, I know. All right, where is everybody?
Well, they're enjoying every last second. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Well, that's good. So we got plenty of time.
Well, welcome back, everybody. Terrific. So I want to open it up now to anyone wanting to report in either on your group discussion or on this general topic. We have about 10 minutes and then we'll do a closing. So the floor is open. Just jump in. And I'd like to say, somebody who, if you've already spoken, please leave some room for others who might not have spoken yet.
I'll go, Judi.
All right, David, thank you.
I just want to say how powerful these 2 breakouts have been, and each time such compatibility with the people in them. The first one we talked about the karmic, having karmic words in our research, and that was very interesting. And this one was more on the shamanic journeys in our research, and a lot of really, emptying the consciousness so we can receive other ways of knowing. So I'll just throw that out there. I'm just really overjoyed by this today. Thank you.
Thank you. And one of the things Paul Schmidt has taught me is that when we are in these breakout rooms, there's a little bit more going on than randomness. There's some kind of synchronicity and karmic connection, I think, and you're just really attesting to that, David. So happy to have you here. Thank you. Who's next?
So if I could just say, I think there was a synchronicity between the two groups, even though it was different people. And I think the big part of the discussion was being true to ourselves. And another word I would throw out is embodiment. And you know, the paradigm that we've been following all these years of left brain trying to fit into everything in a theoretical model, as opposed to just being a whole person and accepting our feelings, our intuitions, and letting that, you know, determine where we go.
Well, and what you're reminding me of, Jerry, is how many doctoral students have been told by their professors, this is what you should do, and no, you shouldn't do that kind of research. Just not allowing people to be who they are. And at the Academy of Management back in August, there was a panel of past presidents of the Academy talking about how wrong that approach of controlling the doctoral students is, and how important it is to let people follow their passion.
Judi for a second.
Thank you, Jerry. Just jump right in, whoever'd like to go next.
Can I raise some contrarianness?
Of course, Matt. What else would you do?
I'm still learning and so forth, but I'm trying to be a good traditional social science researcher with an open mind. But I guess so. There's a certain skepticism that I think comes with it. But I'm totally fine acknowledging that there's other ways of knowing, and the world is open to us to learn these things. But at the same time, how do we know that we're not seeing things that aren't there? Because some of the fields I've studied, I've learned we're very good at fooling ourselves. And also, how do we know that you know, or maybe it's, we're not saying this and I'm reading it in too much, but yes, these things are happening, but rather than saying science can't explain them, it may be that these are new data points, new anomalies that we then throw over to traditional science to say, look, there's something you didn't know. If you're a good scientist, have at it. But it's more the first one that troubles me. How do we know that we're not seeing what we want to see? You know, what makes it different, say, from, I'm going to use a slightly negative word, but how do we know it isn't, you know, how is it different from believing in conspiracies? Because people there think they're certain about what they're saying, but they're wrong.
Yeah, that's really
it's a very actual question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I suppose you see it's a very good point you raise, Matt, and I guess the answer is by being very careful by what you say. So in order try to take perspective and some distance once you have a conviction. Okay, it's a conviction, then think about it again, take some time to reflect and try to triangulate it, try to find other sources of data that would support it or otherwise. You know, in other words, make it into an inquiry, a scientific inquiry, but not with the usual scientific methods, but with the principles that you need to validate a phenomena by evidence from different sources, by different times, etc., etc. And then it's fine, I would say. But you know, we had this discussion in the second split group, and you know, it's very challenging. We are being challenged, and we need to challenge ourselves too every step of the way, because you're right. I mean, it's risky. We can delude ourselves that we didn't win the presidency, etc.
I have a observation about that too, because, and it's interesting to me that the comment and what you said, Mr. Altman, and the comments that I was seeing in the chat, both reflected my experience as a Quaker, because it's a metaphysical Christianity kind of, and it you really are expected to connect to God, and when you take that perspective, you assume that if God tells you you're supposed to protest in the street for whatever, that you're supposed to do that. This is you're supposed to be listening for God's guidance on these things. So the very same question comes up. What do you do? How do you know if this is really God or if this is something else talking to you? And the two things that Quakers always say is that you use patience and community. And so and patience is exactly what you were talking about when you were talking about how it should, you just look for other sources of and check out and think those things through. And then the community, I think, is also what you were talking about when you're saying, bring in these other things. What in a Quaker community is very important to Quakers, and what it really does entail is that you talk about it within the community, and other Quakers are expected. Their responsibility to you is to say, okay, so I see this problem here that maybe you should reflect on. And as you hear what your community has to say, you're doing exactly what you're using. And I think the scientific community kind of does that in the scientific context, that you get lots of feedback from the scientific community that kind of fills those two functions.
That's very helpful, Gladys. Thank you so much.
I would like to just make a comment as well. Somebody on the chat line said it was more about meaning. So when people write things, what is the meaning behind this? Because I often find there's a difference between people in power not willing to discover the meaning behind what somebody has written and just assume that their meaning is correct. And from David Bohm was the first one I really began to understand dialogue. And I have to say I've used dialogue as my main sort of communication process and principle, where the essential thing is to find out what is meant and for you to, in a sense, come together to find the common meaning so that you can go from there. Because assuming that you're right and the other person's wrong is a route to nowhere. And it's awful in the sort of academic world, it's really terrible.
Yeah, and it doesn't allow for transformation or a raising of the relationship. You need listening, sacred listening, I think Julia would say. Yeah. I'm going to save the chat because there's so much rich going on in the chat and I can't catch it all because I'm listening as each person speaks. And so it's kind of like two rich conversations going on at once. And it really is about time for us to wrap up. So I want to thank you all so much for being here. And I'm going to share with you what's coming up in just a minute here. We have every quarter, the Flamekeepers Committee at MSR does webinars like this. And Jerry Bieberman, who spoke just a few minutes ago, is going to be doing our next one on January 21st. And his question now, which might change between now and then, but right now this is the question: what research questions are we asking? So to really, like Rex is saying, look at the deeper meaning behind the kinds of questions we're choosing. And then on April 21st, Chris Laszlo, and he's invited all of the Flamekeepers to be on a panel with him. We'll talk more about prospective psychology for MSR research. Really that what Julia was also sharing, like doing research questions from the present towards the future. I don't know anything about this field, so I'm really looking forward to learning that. And then our newest member of the Flamekeeper Committee, Catherine Pavlovich, who is the editor of the JMSR Journal, the Journal of Management, Spirituality, and Religion. She hasn't chosen a topic yet, or a date, but we'll let you know when that comes. And then in MSR, there's also a research colloquium that meets every month. And if you want to know more about that, even if you're not a member of the Academy of Management or MSR, you can sign up on AOM Connect to get messages about when various meetings are happening. The next one is on November 30th. It's with Nick Phillipson, who is the editor of a couple of my books with Springer, and there was a company he was with before. I've asked Nick to come and talk about, excuse me, how to get published in the academic field. There's books and there's monographs and there's journals, and he's going to share all the different kinds of outlets and what the different pros and cons of the outlets are. So that will be helpful to the academics in our group. And I'm going to stop my sharing here. Thank you once again. First of all, Paul, thank you so much for your support today, technically and energetically. And I want to thank the Flamekeepers for keeping the flame of MSR alive. And yes, he'd see Jerry going like this. And to all of you, the Edgewalkers and the members of the MSR community, and those of you who found us some other way, thank you for showing up and being a part of this very meaningful conversation. So we'll be saving the recording and making that available, and we'll be saving the chat and making that available. And there'll be lots of ways to continue this kind of discussion. So thank you so much for being here, and be well, stay well, and make a difference.
Thank you, Judi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judi.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Judy.
everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judy, and everyone so much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Excellent.
You.
Hello.
So.